All right, there we go.
Okay, so at that point in time, then, of course, my dad took her to the hospital, but that was because there were only a few cars in Mount Pleasant, and Mr. Bird charged. He was, his taxi wasn't a legal taxi service, but he charged. And he replaced Mr. Billy Hall, Mr. Hall, who, he had a horse and buggy, and that would take people, he'd take people back and forth.
Really?
Yeah. In his horse and buggy. So it was a community effort to be able to move around and to, one person's going to the store and, okay, give me the list, so, and you work together, and it was a great community as to grow up in for those reasons. That you had a real community, and Hillary Clinton wrote her book, It Takes a Village. Well, this was really, it was a village, and nobody's house was locked, and my mother would always, she would cook 3 square meals a day. Of course there were 10 of us, but she always cooked for like 30, so whenever you walked in any time of day, there was a full meal, Everybody knew it. Okay, hey, come on. My mother's nickname was Brownie. Mind you, she was your color, but she was the darkest of her siblings, and they called her nickname was Brownie. She was the darkest, yet she was your color. Because she was mixed. But any rate, you everybody would, okay, I'm going over Brownies. What's she cooking tonight? What she cooked? It would be always, my dad would say, I'd like to come home one night and just see Deans at the table, but that didn't happen. Our house, he said, this is the house of the open door. And then, of course, with the bakery, everybody did their turn helping and working at the bakery, too. Many of the young people were over there learning skills and learning how to, didn't realize that's what they were doing, learning how to manage a business and what it takes to be in business and what it takes for the young men to be men. They were being taught what a man has to do. And that was necessary in the black community, because there were such, for the black male, and it's even more true today, I think. Black males are the most discriminated against in the job market. They're always last hired, first fired. And even in the hiring pool, they're the last ones, the least to be hired. So they're always fighting that uphill battle. Their self-esteem is always pushed down, and it's not elevated. I think that's the biggest struggle now in the black community. I have one son, and it's a constant battle to get him to help him to achieve his own self-image, because the self-image for the black male has always been downgraded, and it's been it was purposefully done, and we've got to breathe that back out. I've had my first experience when I went to Paris. I don't know what year, 1994. It's my first time to Paris, and I was absolutely amazed that when I got off the plane in France, I wasn't a black person. That at that time I was married, I was Mrs. Etheridge. And to be a person and not a color from, and then as soon as I got back on the plane with the white Americans to come back home, back into that role of being a black person first. And I often thought, how would it have been had I grown up in an environment where I was just me and there was no label hanging over me. Educationally, how would I have excelled in an environment like that, where I didn't have to constantly fight and have to prove always, the next level, how good I am, and always being evaluated. That never ends. I used to take my direct reports at Merck. I would take them when a new person would come on board, and I'd say, okay, I want you to come out. I want to show you how racism works in America. I'm going to call and make an appointment, luncheon, go schedule it. And I'm going to let them know, my name and that I'm the manager and I'm having this meeting at their establishment. I said, now I want you to watch and observe. I will be the only black female there. There'll be all white males and white females who report to me. And watch them go. When it comes time, everything will be directed at the oldest white male or the oldest white female at the table. I will be ignored. And they would say to me after when of course that's what would occur, and I said, well, you gotta understand. They said, well, doesn't that make you angry? And I said, no, because this is what's been ingrained into them. They're not doing it because they're purposefully being racist. It's ingrained. They can't help it. It's learned behavior. And I said, we have to get them to unlearn it, and you're going to work under me, and you're coming with all of your prejudices and biases that you have learned. So you've got to unlearn that. And they would say, you are so right. They never saw how subtle the racism is. And I said, this is what we as blacks have to deal with every day. You walk into a store or anywhere, and they'll follow you around as if you're a thief. You're already, you're put in a category just because you're a black person. But you shouldn't be angry about that. You should understand that the person who is acting out against you is doing that only because this is what they have learned and what they've been taught. That's what their experience has been. So it's up to you then to say, okay, point it out to them. If you see a situation like that and you say, you know what, that was a very racist, I tell somebody even today in the store, that was a very racist thing to say or to do. I said, I know you're not aware of it, but that was offensive.
They're herd followers, it sounds like. They're not able to access the higher level of thinking.
Well, because they've been trained by, it's the way that, because you take a child, give you an example, take the kids under 7 years old, they don't know black or white. By the time they get to junior high, the separation starts. They've been great friends all the way up through 6th, 7th grade, and then the separation occurs. Why does that occur? It occurs because the intervening has been societal. It's okay now. It's not acceptable to hang around with your black friend that you had all your life. It's no longer acceptable because you're going as a white. You're going here, and you're going to stay there. And it's that kind of barrier that has to. I'm going back to what's going on here with the reverse racism that's happening. You cannot become, as in Animal Farm. You cannot get to a point where you can't see the pigs, don't know which are the pigs and which are the men. You can't do that. You have to fight against that always, so that you see individuals. You don't see a forest, you see that tree. And people just have forgotten that. And I grew up in a generation where we were very much into identifying ourselves not as a race in the sense that that's all we are. We wanted to be identified as individuals, as a person, because when you identify as a race, it's very easy to dehumanize that person. But when you look at that person as an individual and you say, okay, that is a human being. I heard people say in light of what's happened in Japan, well, the Japanese are yada yada. Excuse me, those people are undergoing horrific situation, and their government is lying to them saying, you're not going to be radioactive. Now, come on, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that the ground is irradiated, the water's irradiated. Come on, I mean, it's even, I was laughing at the fact that Delaware, this past couple of days, they passed a thing where, okay, those who live within 10 miles of the nuclear plant there in Delaware, they're going to be given the...
Thyroid?
Yeah, the iodine.
Yes.
They're going to be given those. And I'm like, okay, so if I live 10.1 mile, I don't get.
Why not give it to everyone?
I don't get it. So the point is, to me, being in medicine and what I do, but I'm like, what you're saying basically is that this drug is really not that effective. You haven't, you're here playing this game with the public mind.
Yes, it looks like
with this mindset to make you look like you're doing something, but you're not.
It's classic politics.
It's classic politics because that radiation is not going to stop at 10.1.
Oh, it's like what they did.
It's like my kids. I was married and we lived in Eagleville. My kids went to Methacton, which was the high school was within the 10-mile radius of Limerick. So the evacuation was that I was to pick my children up at Norristown High School, which was 3.5, not even 3 miles away. So, okay, as a parent, no, don't take my child out of Methacton High School. Just leave my kid there. Don't take him over to Norristown. What's the point? Yeah, there is no point. And they were arguing with me in a meeting, and I'm like, with a community town meeting, and no, use your heads, people. That cloud isn't going to stop at 10.
Be nice if it did, though.
It'd be nice if it did, but if the wind is blowing to the east, it's coming.
Oh yeah, it's like when Chernobyl went up, the radiation was detected in New England.
Yeah.
Well, they've said that the radiation from Chernobyl, there's trace amounts in almost everybody's body.
Yeah, exactly. It went everywhere.
Exactly. Well, it's the same thing. You had, I don't know where, you kids are probably too young, but when Mount St. Helens erupted, and we had the cloud here.
Oh yeah, it goes for miles.
And that's what, 3,500 miles away, and I mean, it was for weeks. The dust cloud was here.
Oh yeah,
and the sky was orange.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, okay, tell me about radiation stopping at 10 miles.
Yeah, it's a joke.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It is ridiculous.
It will go wherever the wind pushes them.
Yeah.
Whichever direction on the particles, and it's going. That's what's terrifying about nuclear energy, nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Well, I always said that when they first started with creating the plants. And I'm like, okay, we don't know how to dispose of it. What's the half-life?
Oh, thousands
of years.
Solution?
Hello?
In New Mexico.
Yeah. You don't know how to dispose of this. Why are you creating more?
Yeah, they've really opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah. Yeah, and so as a kid of the 60s, before there was DNA, before we even knew what DNA, well, those of us who were just on the cutting edge, and... you look at it and say, wait a minute, we are creating our own Frankenstein monsters. And we're doing it, not only are we doing it physiologically, we're doing it psychologically too. We are creating monsters out here. We've got a generation of people who are growing up. It's all about me. That's why when you said that you're working on this project, and it's great for a school to focus on being community, developed, and looking at the whole, and not looking at, what will I get when I get out of college? Okay, will I be a doctor? Will I be an engineer? How much money am I going to make? How about how much you're going to give back? And you don't see that happening. You don't see I see kids coming out, especially the MBAs coming out, talk about a very self-motivated group. It's all about themselves. It's not about the human being. And I think for me, being in the pharmaceutical industry for 35 years, the difference I've seen in the last 10, 15 years, and I say direct-to-consumer advertising is what has caused the problem in the pharmaceutical industry. Because prior to that, physicians had control. Your MDs had control over prescribing the medications to you. Now with direct-to-consumer advertising, The physicians no longer have control. The HMOs developed, taking the control away from your physician. When you go into his office, he can only do so much. So he's now handcuffed as far as treating you because of the marketers. And I look at that and I said, this is really going to become a problem long term. And I don't know how you turn the clock back on that. So that the people who have been educated to be able to take care of us, I look at it, I said HMOs, and to me they're practicing medicine without a license, and yet they're allowed to get away with it because you have people who are making decisions, life and death decisions, on the care that a patient gets based on an actuarial table. And they're not MDs. And they're making these decisions saying, well, this person, no, they don't need this treatment. No, they don't need that treatment. Well, you're not a physician. You haven't been trained to do that. You haven't gone to school. I want to see your credentials.
They can't make that call.
But they do, and they've been given that license to do that by our government from not paying attention. If I went out here and said, as much knowledge as I have of medicine, I'm not an MD, but I can tell you more about drugs than an MD and a pharmacist can tell you. But that doesn't make me an MD nor a pharmacist. So, and then you've got, the poor MDs they only know what I put together and help write in a package circular. That's all they know because they come out of college, out of MD school now with 6 credits in pharmacology. Because they're dependent upon the pharmaceutical industry to tell them what the drugs do. Not on their own knowledge. And I mean, I'm amazed when you go back and you read, because I am, like you, a student of history. You read Ben Franklin, and you read Thomas Jefferson, and you realize how many areas, different disciplines. Thank you, but how many disciplines were they in? Today we're tracked to be one discipline. We are not taught to be multi-dimensional anymore. It's one thing, and that's it.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Jefferson was an architect. He was a scholar. He knew Latin. He knew Greek.
Exactly.
The man wasn't. He wasn't. You're absolutely right. He wasn't. He wasn't just like, I think I'm going to be a statesman.
He wasn't just a statesman.
He designed some beautiful building. Look at Monticello's. One of the most beautiful buildings in the nation.
That's what I'm talking about. And Ben Franklin, you look at them, they were more than just one thing.
Their fields were wide open.
You're
absolutely right. Now
and yet,
we're concentrating on that.
Right, and that's because our educational system focuses you and tracks you to one thing. It's like, okay, the days of being a liberal arts student, well, what are you going to do with that? I'm sure you get that, communications major. What are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
They don't understand that you're probably going to be the successes. Whereas those who are tracked to one thing, I'm going to be an engineer, they'll be bored and blow their brains out by the time they're 40. They'll be so bored.
I've been waiting for someone to say that for so long. That's my thought every day.
Really, really, it is much better to me to be a well-rounded person, to have interests in several areas, than to be so totally focused on one area and then have no communication skills with anyone else. That's what scares me about this whole texting thing. I'm like, these kids won't know how to talk to them. There's a generation growing up who will not know how to communicate with another human being.
Oh yeah,
it's already.
Not just texting, it's phone,
but that's internet, all of it.
Very impersonal.
Very impersonal.
Becoming desocialized.
It's already happened.
But you can see the effects, right?
And so, but we're a global economy. And I tell my nieces who live down the street, my brother's daughters, they're 14 and 16, and I tell them all the time, you're not competing with this kid sitting next to you in class. You're competing with that kid in Seoul, Korea. You're competing with the kid in Tokyo. You're competing with the kid in Beijing. You're competing with the kid in India, whose focus is total education. Here, it's I'll do it if I want to. There's too much laissez-faire as far as education is concerned, and we're going to be, we're throwaway generations. We have all these throwaway generations out there, and who are not going to keep America number one. America is number one because we had all the thinkers. We had people who were problem solvers, people who were achievers, who saw something that needed to be fixed and went about figuring out how to fix it. Now you have generations out there who wait for somebody else to do it, to provide the solutions. Where are these thinkers going to come from? Are they being taught how to think? And how to problem solve? That isn't happening anymore. And I just look at it, they're not even, here, read this book. I was telling these, here, read Great Expectations. Well, why would I read that? There's a movie.
Actually 100% true. 100%.
Why would I read it? There's a movie. And I said, but no, the movie doesn't, it gives you a flavor of what the book was. You need to read the whole story to understand the deprivation and to understand what happened in England, what was going on in the Industrial Revolution, because that's part of our history too. And that's why people came to America, to get away from, to escape what was going on in Europe. You really have to begin, and you have to put it all together, because they're not getting it from their school systems. They're not teaching it that way. They're not making the connections, from globally, how this country grew, what made it what it is. It's interesting, because I was working after I retired from Merck, I went to Aventis. And Aventis was taken over. It was a hostile takeover by Sanofi. Well, we had to go to Paris for an introduction to the upper management of Sanofi. And the CEO greets us and begins, us as being the Americans, and say, we don't think anything of you Americans. You have achieved nothing. France is everything, and you are nothing.
That's like a traditional French
attitude. Yeah. Exactly. But you're over here, you're buying us because our drugs are and we have a pipeline you don't have. This is why you are a mouse swallowing an elephant, because you had money to do it. But you cannot, which they have done, is you come in and you take over this huge company, and you want to treat it like a mom and pop shop. Well, it doesn't quite work that way, and they've learned in the last 4 or 5 years that it's not a matter of who has the most money. It is, can you manage a big corporation like that? And you do have to work with the FDA. You don't tell the FDA what you want them to do. You have to work with them, not. It's
rather hard to get around some of those government agencies.
Yeah, exactly. But France, the French had to learn and understand that's, this is a country of laws and regulations, and we take it very seriously, and you can't just act as if it doesn't exist. There are consequences. But that's what makes America great, because we do have laws, and we do have order. As much as people may be resistant to authority in this country, you've got a lot of that going on. There's a lot of resistance. However, that is what keeps us together. Otherwise, it would be total chaos. It would be total chaos and anarchy, and that's not good either.
Oh, that's probably a lot worse.
Yeah, it's a lot worse. So, but we are tolerant of those anarchists among us. Our greatest threat are our homegrown terrorists, not the terrorists from outside. It's the homegrowns that are
now more than ever.
Now more than ever, because you've got a group of people who feel they have the right to act on their own biases, and that's what scares me again about what's going on here in Mount Pleasant. It brings me back to that era when people were acting on their biases and did not care about who they hurt, in the very acts. It makes me cringe, the thought that black people would resort to acting the same way that white people acted in the 60s. And the attitudes. That's why I embrace those who are the new immigrants. I embrace them. Can't exclude them. They're here. They're necessary. Can't exclude them. You know, I just want them to pay taxes. So I want them to be accounted for. Give them a number. So they pay taxes on the 15th. That's all. Just give them a number. But yeah, you know, it's. Tell you one thing. It was hard coming around the first day I came around the corner here to Henry Avenue, and Miss Hall's house was gone, and Mr. Thorogood's house was gone, and Miss Land's house, they were gone. It was hard, you know, when you turn the corner, oh my God, the woods it's no longer there. You know, that was all woods down there, and it was where we played as kids. We played down in the woods, and it's very different. However, Miss Hall, who lived with me, and she died at my house, she was 103, and she was raised here in Mount Pleasant. Her parents moved here when she was 6 months old. So I look at that Mount Pleasant is old. Miss Hall was 103, and it was here before she got here at 103. So a lot of things can change in 100 years. You know? Yeah. And for people to say, well, we don't want it to change, it can't change. Well, yeah, it's going to change.
Change
it has to.
Inevitable.
Change is necessary. And it's necessary. Growth doesn't happen unless there's change.
There's always progress.
Yeah.